Hi people, I'm not gonna make this one too long because it's the early hours and I'm quite tired. But I think it's important to say for the record. So apparently Roger Waters of Pink Floyd has had some concerts cancelled in Poland because of a backlash due to his stance on the war in Ukraine. Um, which of course, reading that led me to follow up on what is his stance. And unfortunately, it turns out he's yet another Putin stooge. Um, That's how I see it. I mean, his position is pretty much to blame NATO and Ukrainian nationalists for this war. Um, and this is just obscene. It's obscene. I should say on his page he is claiming that his shows weren't cancelled and it was a one-off incident, and it doesn't really matter to be quite honest. What I'm more interested in is the fact that there is a small number of fringe figures. By fringe, I mean they're in a minority. They're not the majority, but for whatever reason, whether it's their worldview or whether they think they're being rebellious or whatever it is, it's sincere views. Um, you know, I just think it is obscene to present yourself as a pacifist, which he's doing on his page, and talk about human rights and talk about the need to find peace and all these nice, harmonious words, whilst you're simultaneously acting as a propagandist for a murderous dictator. It's actually disgusting. Um, and interesting that on his page he says, just remember to keep your comments responsible because people of all ages read this. Well, is it responsible to push the lies of the Kremlin, Mr. Waters? Um, Feelings in Poland are understandably very strong against Russia. And I frankly have no sympathy for any heat that he gets, short of violence, um, because his stance on Ukraine is nothing short of victim blaming. And I saw some Ukrainians commenting saying that they were fans, but no more. Now, I should say as a caveat, I didn't follow Pink Floyd. Have no strong views on them either way as musicians. Um, I do think Mr. Waters has Mr. Waters. He doesn't even deserve the respect. But anyway, I think he's been political in the past. It's not unheard of for aging rock stars to be opinionated on political issues. That's hardly unusual. But I just find it very sad and very pathetic that there are Western celebrities, and he's just the latest. There's others. Oliver Stone is another one, the renowned film director. Um, Peter Hitchens, early in the war, he wrote this grotesque article blaming the West and basically condoning Putin's actions, saying that Putin had no choice. There's a lot of lies being spun, and one of the most common tropes that they spin out, well, there's two actually. One is that Russia felt threatened, it was surrounded by NATO. Well, this is just a lie. If you look at a map, the vast majority of Russia is not surrounded by NATO. The vast majority of Russia is in Asia and even the European part of Russia. Um, you have the Baltic states and Romania. Ukraine isn't in NATO, so this idea that it's surrounded by NATO is a falsehood. But if countries are going to NATO, such as Sweden and Finland, it's precisely because of Russia's thuggish behaviour. Um, Now, I don't know if Roger Waters is just a deluded fool or if it's actually ideological. Either way, it's a problem because he's in a position of influence. I don't believe that people will necessarily follow what an aging rock star says is gospel, but he has 2.5 million followers, so I think it's a problem. Um, and it's a callous insult to the people of Ukraine who are suffering constantly from Russian aggression. I mean, what they've uncovered in those forests, the masquerades, the atrocities at Kramatorsk train station, at Butcha, and it just goes on and on. Um, Even if he does want to take the Russian side, how does he condone what's happening to protesters in Russia? Women who are being, dragged away into police vans. Why? Because they don't want their men to be used as cannon fodder. There was a young woman in Moscow, very bravely, holding up a sign saying, I can't remember if it was "We are not scared" or "We are scared." Either way, it would be relevant. But the Sky reporter said that this is dangerous, and she said in English, I know. And literally seconds later, she was dragged away. Now, what does a comfortable millionaire rock star like Roger Waters have to say for that? And I'm drawing that into it because he gets to go to his nice, comfortable bed, no doubt in some mansion in the home counties or wherever the hell he lives, whilst Ukrainians are in bomb shelters. And what's I find most grotesque about his position is he masquerades it as a peace thing. So it's a lot of Putin apologists have been doing this, have been sort of saying, oh, we want peace. The Ukrainians should opt for peace. So they're obscenely trying to present the majority who see it for what it is, as warmongers. It's Putin that started this war. It's Russia that started this war. That is what is so reprehensible about the lies of people like Roger Waters, which is that somehow the Ukrainians are to blame. So that was the other. I mentioned the NATO thing, but this thing about Ukrainian nationalism. Now, I've said before, I'm aware that there is a far right faction in Ukraine. I'm aware there's hardline nationalistic elements. You know what? There is in Russia as well. So if your issue is with nationalism, then why not? What about what about Russian nationalism? Rampant. That is what is so I find so insufferable about these Putin stooges. They've got selective outrage. I mean, they say they're against warmongering, but they have nothing to say about Russia. They say they're against nationalism. They've nothing to say about extreme Russian neo-nationalism. And you know what? The nationalism in Ukraine, put it this way, if there were fringe elements in Ukraine, if there was kind of hard right factions, if anything, it will only be galvanized because of Putin's actions. When a country is invaded, obviously people are going to be galvanized regardless of what the background is. So even Russian speakers in Ukraine have resented the Russian invasion. As for these sham referendums, I think they're being used as a way to try and deflect and to try and make it look as if the Ukrainians are being unreasonable by not accepting democracy, except it's not democracy. They're a complete sham, organized by corrupt Kremlin officials. Anyone that thinks that Moscow has a democratic bone in its body right now is utterly deluded. Um, but to be quite honest, I just feel sickened by these Western stooges for Putin. Russian nationalists I could sort of understand because they're brainwashed with it. But Westerners, Oliver Stone, Roger Waters, Peter Hitchens, Kim Iverson, there's many others, unfortunately. They're a minority, but they're very confident in their position, and I just think they're quislings. I think they're reprehensible, and I think they're plastic pacifists. I mean, what is the honor of saying let's have peace if it means the Ukrainians giving away a big chunk of the land, if it means the Ukrainians not getting justice for the crimes against Ukrainian civilians, if it means basically allowing the Ukrainians to have to submit to Russian rule, i.e., those areas occupied by Russia. Children will be brainwashed by Russian curriculums. We've already had very troubling reports of deportations of Ukrainian civilians to Russia. I think it's pretty damn obvious who the real fascists are. And it's one of I've noticed this for years, like people who used to lap up everything RT said. But I just can't get my head around Putin stooges. I mean, this so-called special military operation, no one can be so deluded as to believe that is still the case. No one. And the cracks are starting to appear in Russia now. Even China and India are getting nervous. about their support for Putin's Russia. So I just think it's utterly obscene that you have Western celebrities and politicians, Gerhard Schroeder, Segal Royale, um, Giorgia Meloni, Matteo Salvini. These people are, and they're on the left and the right. That's the curious thing about this. They can be they straddle the far left and the far right. Tucker Carlson in the United States. These people are moral cards. I mean, they may be speaking up for the conviction, which you could say, well, that's what they're doing, but they're moral cards because whilst Ukrainians are fighting for their lives, they are supporting their oppressor. I consider that moral cowardice. It's like the analogy you used before. It would be like, anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. It's the early hours of the morning, but I hope if Waters does go to Poland, he gets a lot of heat. You know, some would say it's cancel culture. Well, is it? I mean, surely if there is enough public feeling against someone like Roger Waters in a country like Poland, which knows full well what Russian subjugation is, and they don't want him to perform, is it cancel culture or is that actually democracy? Because in his little disclaimer, in his quite lengthy disclaimer saying that he wasn't, his shows weren't cancelled, he claimed it wasn't very democratic. Well, is it democratic for you, Roger Waters, to be pushing the lies of the Russian dictator? How dare you talk about democracy whilst defending Putin? That's obscene. And I know he's not going to see this video, but he's just another, I would say useful idiot, but I'm not sure if it actually is idiocy. I'm not sure if it's ignorance. What's more troubling is that he might actually know, and it might just be that he's so dogmatic in his worldview that he's just anti-West for the sake of it. I think there are people who, and know some of them, are among my viewership who are just anti-NATO with a knee-jerk response, and they don't actually look at the facts. The fact is Russia invaded Ukraine. NATO did not invade Russia. That is the fact. Russia is the aggressor in this war. That's the simple reality. It's Russian troops in Ukraine, not Ukrainian troops in Russia. Um, so the lies of these propagandists is just utterly pathetic. Um, and in Western society, you know, we value free speech unlike Russia. So they can have their views, but I think that if they get stigmatized for it, if they get ridiculed, denounced, they deserve everything that comes at them, short of intimidation or violence. But you know, if someone like Roger Waters gets heat over this, I have zero sympathy because it's beyond reprehensible. His position is a callous insult to thousands of Ukrainian men, women, and children slaughtered, tortured, subjugated, humiliated by the Russian invaders. Shame on you, Roger Waters. Shame on all the useless moral minnows out there. I say useless, maybe I should say useful for Putin. I'm disgusted by it, to be quite honest. And I hope if, you know, when he does interviews about his tour, I hope this is brought up. I hope journalists put him on the spot. I think it's disgusting.